Catus Maximus here, this time with a much older Radio Shack Archer product. These are some compact or miniature nut drivers, kind of like the Exolites that I've reviewed earlier, and Vacos and even Channel Lock makes mini nut drivers like this. Plus the additional auxiliary handle that you put over the nut driver to get a little bit of extra torque when you need to. So Radio Shack actually still does have some locations. They went bankrupt, but unlike, say, Hollywood Video or something where they're just totally gone, they're kind of like Sears, where there is some vestigials of the company remaining. But these are older. These are Japanese made, but these are much lower grade. That's why I suspect they're from the 80s. Because basically, Japanese made some both high quality stuff, but some very cheap tools. And then once China's manufacturing started really exploding, all the super cheap stuff became even cheaper. And so China took over the manufacturing of all the junk stuff. This is definitely something that would have been made in China in the 1990s or later. But in the 70s or 80s, the Japanese is where a lot of cheap stuff came from, as well as better quality stuff. And nowadays, since all the super cheap stuff went to China, Japanese now is more mid-grade and high-grade stuff. At least things that are still made in Japan, kind of like made in USA stuff. It's not lots of American companies who have products that aren't American-made, as we all know, particularly from all the things I've reviewed on my channel. So some of the things that really kind of sets these apart as being cheaper, one is this like terrible flashing. I mean, that flashing is really cheap in the molding here. This happens to be an 1/8 inch. If we do compare to the Exolites, they don't even follow now most of the colors of these handles of these nut drivers are standardized. An 1/8 inch in Exolite and in Vaco and in Channel Lock, we're going to have red handles, but for some reason Archer decided to go their own route. Even though the Exolites had been around long before then, they decide they're just going to do their own handle coloring. Such as like on the 3/8 we have a light blue, where they chose red on the Archers. The other thing that you may notice, I'm missing the 1/4 inch of this set. I'm just going to redonate after making this video, but this is not a tool I've done a review on my channel, and I don't think there are any reviews of this even on YouTube in its entirety. So this is for people who may find these on eBay or something like that. They're cheap. You buy them if they're a couple dollars. If you find Exolites, those are the ones you find for $5 or $10. So besides terrible molding on these, we can see that there's some real big inconsistency. If we'll just go ahead and pick all these up. We can see some, like here, have really thin walls, and then some like this have extra thick walls, and on this 1/8 inch it's super thick. And really, the quality is also noticeable in a couple other ways. One is the fit. If I put this Allen wrench in here, which is an American-made, these are a ST, so these are Superior Tool, American-made. Anyway, we can see that there's just a huge amount of play in this. Really pretty bad. I mean, this wrench wobbles all over the place. The other thing that we'll notice is it only goes in just a tiny amount. Now, if we compare that to, say, the Exolite, much better tolerances in the Exolite. Once again, the walls are a little bit more sensicles. They're not extra thick for where they're using the same stock for making multiple sizes. They're actually using separate stock sizes on the Exolites, which is nice. Tighter broaching, because this is just a much better fit. This wrench is much more stiff in there. And what we'll also notice is that it goes in about twice as far. So you just have extra depth so it can fully seat on whatever you're using, which is a nice touch. And these do have a bit of a hollow shaft, so you can use these on little nuts. And that's where you end up using these, is lots of times in electronics and that type of stuff. You'll be working on little tiny fasteners. So anyway, that's the deal with the Radio Shack Archers. Their little Exolite knockoff nut drivers are terrible. They're Japanese made, so I assume they're a little bit better than like some bottom of the barrel Chinese versions of these, but they're still cheap Japanese tools with inconsistent wall thicknesses, not very good finish. I mean, like this green one here, there's just a huge piece of flashing on that. You can see, I mean, the molds just were not pressed all the way together, allowing plastic to see through the sides. And then not doing anything to finish that up. I mean, that's really bad. That's actually a pretty sharp piece of plastic on that. So kind of a shame they kind of threw away having a Japanese made tool. And that may have actually been part of the target with Archer here, is simply the fact that they could put made in Japan on the packaging, even though they were really bottom tier tools. And this is, among other things, one of the reasons Radio Shack went belly up, as they end up just getting too caught up in a race to the bottom. And that was really unfortunate, because Radio Shack really was known for having lots of pretty unique things that were actually pretty good for their price, good value for their price. Back in the heyday of radio scanners, there were some Radio Shack models that were really well respected. There were some Radio Shack models of metal detectors that were really well respected in the yesteryears. And they just didn't hold true to that philosophy, when it probably would have maybe or maybe not would have helped save them, but certainly would have given them a better reputation, rather than just trying to do stuff like this, where you have just really low quality tools with a bad fit and finish. That just leaves a bad taste in people's mouths. Plus the fact that they were notorious for just insisting on having all your customer information every single purchase. That was one of the nightmares of them. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody who's been watching and subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Till next time, Catus, Maximus out.